Welcome to the Rel2 podcast, where we give strategies and advice to government and national security experts looking to transition into the private sector. We're your hosts, Richard and Cameron. You are muted on my end.
Thank you. Okay, this is editing's amazing, but here we go. Welcome back to the Rel2 podcast. We've had a little bit of a siesta. Rich was busy gallivanting around France, drinking all of the wines and all of the champagnes, but we're really happy to be back this week. We are really lucky in the sense that, you know, a lot of the people that we've talked to in previous episodes have been kind of your traditional, you know, they're going to go from intelligence to management consulting and just kind of work their way up the corporate ladder. It's like, it's in a way, it's a jump from one corporate entity to another. Today's a totally different story. And I think that this is, I think, really a testament to, like, you know, you can do anything that you are like working hard at and digging into. And when you're looking to make the transition, really, it's an opportunity to assess, like, are there passions, are there things that you love and you care about that can become careers for you? So we're joined today by Kelly, former CIA CT analyst. Kelly, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so good. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to have a chance to talk about this. Feels a little bit strange going from not talking about something for so long to finally having the opportunity to discuss it in a public forum. So I'm really excited, and I feel like I'm in good company.
100%. And like the audience that we like usually get for this podcast, DC based, a lot of them are probably former colleagues, but it's like a really, I think, an interesting transition that we all have to go through. And so, you know, your story is so unique. Could you kind of start us off just at the beginning? So how did you get where you got, and what kind of pushed you out the door?
There's miles and miles between those questions.
we can break it up too. We can break it up.
But yeah, I'd love to. So, the question of how I got into it is always an interesting one. I didn't have any family who had been in the government or who had been service members at all. So it was quite a departure from everything that I had grown up around. And to be candid, I don't have a really great reason for how I came to it, other than I was pretty good at language learning. And I had some teachers early on in middle school and high school who really encouraged me with my languages, you know, like middle school Spanish and stuff. Who said you really might have something here, and the same thing was kind of happening with my writing. And beyond that, I just knew that I was easily bored. I was always very easily bored, and so I was going to need to do something unconventional. I think the unconventional life has always been really appealing to me ever since I was a little kid. So somewhere along the line there, I just decided this is what I was going to do. And I can remember when I first started vocalizing that to family members and mentors, you know, the response you usually get is, that's cool, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. I can't tell you the number of times in my life I've heard, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And while I understand the impetus behind that, I really rebel against that, because I think the mentality of knowing you're meant for something has actually gotten me quite far in life. So I ended up applying when I was in college, and the recruitment process for me was a little bit circuitous. I ended up taking a different job that took me abroad for a little under a year during the process, so everything was really delayed. But ultimately, I found my way there. I eventually came through in the graduate student program, so I was studying to get my master's degree in security studies, and then I just started over the summer. And from there, I was offered a full-time position and came on full-time right after I graduated. I had always been quite interested in the Middle East. I'd studied Arabic, and I was, again, for reasons that I can't really depict now, I was interested in counterterrorism. So that's what I went into. And, you know, for a long time, it was the only thing I wanted to do. And I wouldn't listen to anyone else when they told me I should apply other places. I knew this is what I was going to do. And to be candid with you, it happened quite easily. I just, you know, I applied when I was ready. I felt like I'd really put in the work. And so when that time came, it was just and now we're off. And what I found quite quickly was that it is not necessarily a place where free thinking thrives. And I want to be really careful here because I have tremendous respect for the organization, and many of my closest friends are still there who I think are the smartest people I know. And they're doing amazing things there. I've always been someone who was kind of like counterculture, I guess, a little bit. And I'm not a very good yes man. I ask a lot of questions, and I found that when I asked a lot of questions, I wasn't getting a lot of good answers. And in many cases, I wasn't getting any answers. And at a certain point, that just started to weigh on me beyond what I thought was acceptable. So that's the bigger answer. And then I think there's another part of it that was just, I was creatively unfulfilled. I just had all these things I wanted to do and places I wanted to see. And I thought the agency was going to send me everywhere and do all that hard work for me. And it just didn't pan out that way. And so I just decided to take matters into my own hands.
And there's so much to unpack there. Like, can we rewind just a little to the point you made about like the free thinking? I think that it's really interesting when you kind of, there's like two different parts of the analyst. There's the individual who's like you as an individual computer looking at all the data in the screen, and you're coming to these conclusions, hypotheses, and you're reading and kind of getting this picture of what you think is like the truth. You take that to your team, and then everybody kind of has a slightly different take on like why a certain thing is happening or what's going on. And like, there's a certain like consensus building of, well, what can we all say like that we agree on about like said thing that's happening? But then there's all the levels beyond that, internally from, the regional organizations to the more like the mission centric organizations. I can't remember what the phraseology is anymore, but that distinction also creates kind of compromise. And so at the end of it, you usually have papers, I feel like, that are incredibly well written, incredibly like well researched and argued, but they oftentimes don't say a ton. It's incremental adjustments along the way. And I think a lot of the magnitude of the events that we're seeing on the ground often get diluted. So all of which is just to say, I totally hear you on that point. And I think it's like it's one of those complexities of the space that you wouldn't know unless you've been in it and through it. So can we talk about like and my follow-up question for you though is like, as you were going through that, how much of the kind of the pushback you were getting and like the lack of answers was driven by like an unwillingness to kind of reassess the bottom line, like question the orthodox thinking versus like, I don't know if you give more detail about that. I don't want to lead you somewhere you don't want to go.
Yeah. There's so much in there because yes, in part it was this very minute, these very minute situations where we were talking about literal papers, that do, as you say, get up to a certain point and you kind of get there and you wonder what the paper even says anymore. And then there were, on the other hand, like systems and just general processes that the agency was undergoing and asking us to undergo that just made no sense to me fundamentally. And so I'll talk about all of that. I think in any big organization, you're going to run into the old, this is how we've done it in the past, and this has worked for us. And when you pair that with a really fast-paced, dynamic environment where information needs to get out the door quickly, that doesn't leave a lot of space for change. I think real, true, meaningful change requires space and it requires time. And so I think one factor is just simply not really having that. And that's not necessarily a fault I can pin on any one person. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. But if we don't set aside resources and people to rethink these processes, then we're never going to have that time, and we're just going to continue to make the same mistakes, and we're going to continue to, I don't want to say keep making intelligence failures. Like, failures are always going to happen, but if we don't take time to like meaningfully evaluate how the mistakes happen or how we could have done things better, we're never going to fix them. And I just didn't feel like we were ever given time to really do that. And when recommendations were made, perhaps we could think about it this way, it was just shot down time and time again because the people, managers have even less time than us. So they're like, well, if you're going to do it differently, then we have to learn how to edit it differently. And then by that point, and the higher up customer already knows how to interpret our intel. And it's just like, well, then where does it end? There is no end to it. So I think that was something that I experienced. And then just on a a strategic level, there were larger papers that we were asked to write where I felt like the end game had already been decided. We were just supposed to come up with the space in between and the data to support that end game, which, is obviously completely contrary to what we should be doing. I just saw that happen one too many times, and I saw one too many good people in a bad system make bad decisions. And I think that gets really problematic really quickly, because good people do bad things in bad systems. And I don't mean bad in terms of like nefarious. I just mean bad as in like less than ideal.
Yeah. No, 100%.
I almost wonder if it's a symptom of just a large bureaucracy, because it's like seeing it on the other side. I could say the same thing, or there's similar characteristics you just mentioned that were in Deloitte, and we're on the hill, right? It's just like these big, massive ships that are so hard to steer in a different direction, and people create careers out of maintaining the status quo and doing things how they are supposed to be done. It really does sap the creativity, sap the opportunity for like innovation and just like new ways of thinking things. And then when you are that person that's like, hey, maybe we should do it this way, or is this actually the right approach? Because I definitely think that there's like areas where there have been times where it's like, yeah, the end, we're almost like justifying our assessments, like we've made them up and now try to find like bullet points to support these things. And it's just like, are you sure we should be doing it this way? And like, it's so I think that there's a lot of people that are in the IC who are at that same level of frustration. Obviously, you took a little while before you were just like completely fed up with it. What were some of was there any release valves for you? Did you have anything like either like at work that you could potentially do, or like outside of work that kind of like scratched that itch before it really got to the point where you were just like, shit, I'm out of here?
Yeah. Yes. And I'd actually like to touch on what you brought up, just because I think it's a really good point about these same issues existing at Deloitte. By no means do I think that these issues are endogenous to the agency. I think that they are just the nature of large organizations, generally speaking. And something I'm really grateful for is that I did have work experience at other large organizations before coming to the agency, one of which was the United Nations. And it was a very short stint there, but a stint nonetheless. And so anytime I heard people say like, oh, this stuff only happens here, it's like, oh, it really doesn't. Like, it really happens everywhere. I think the issue becomes like, well, we know this is an issue with large organizations, but unfortunately the large organizations are the ones that have been tasked with this mission, whatever that mission may be. And so we have to reconcile the problem somehow. I'm not here to present any answers to that problem, but
we will point it out.
But it exists, and I'm here to point it out. But I completely agree with you. I think that this is characteristic of large organizations everywhere. Well, yeah, I could go on. In terms of a release valve, do you mean just in terms of like literally kind of blowing off steam and things that I did, the reason why I was able to be there 5 years? Yeah, I guess
what was your coping mechanism, if you will?
Yeah. Well, and of course, like there were things I did that I absolutely loved and that I think about constantly. The trainings that I got to participate in, I mean, I think everyone expects me to like play it cool, but you guys, like, I still feel like a total badass when I think about the things that I got to do, even though it was all like fake training scenarios. Like, I feel amazing that I got to do that. And like someone like me, I had never held a weapon before, I feel a lot more powerful and a lot safer now than I did before. So I'm super grateful for those things. And of course I didn't travel quite as much as I would have liked, but I was able to travel still quite a bit and spend some longer periods of time in places of the world that I never would have otherwise seen. And those experiences were overwhelmingly positive. And I think had I possibly gone a different route at the organization where I was doing that more often, I could have lasted a lot longer. Because by all means, when I joined, I thought I was a lifer. I mean, it is the only thing I wanted to do. So there's that. All to say, there were parts that I really enjoyed. And I think I also knew myself and I knew I needed a creative outlet. So I actually COVID is the reason why like my business exists now, because we were, I think, of everyone who suffered during COVID, like I have to think that those of us in government were some of the most fortunate in that we were still getting a paycheck. And like, at least for me, I mean, there were full weeks where I didn't work. So it was a tremendously privileged position to be in. And I'm also someone who like can't possibly sit still. So I had that time and I was like, wow, I've been given this time to finally create something for myself. And so that's when I started really diving into like, what does it look like to be a business owner? How might I do this? Could this be an exit strategy? And I will say that from a very early point, that's what the business was. It was explicitly an exit strategy. It wasn't a hobby or something that I thought was nice or something that I had done since high school. Like I didn't buy my first camera until I was 25. So everything was like self-taught, a decision. I'm going to leave. I need to get out of here and I need to take the next year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it takes to cultivate a business such that I can leave and not like live in poverty.
Well, and I did you a disservice, Kelly, and apologies in advance. Like what I forgot to mention to our audience is not only was Kelly, at the world's preeminent like intelligence agency, she's also now a world-class photographer. Like a lot of your work has been featured on Vogue, right? I don't even know the entire list, but as I look at like what you've built for yourself and the time that you have, I think that in a lot of ways, like you defy expectations about like how someone would expect your life would go. And it's like, I think that's crazy to hear. Like you hadn't even held a camera, right? Until you're like sitting there, but like, I'm going to do this shit and I'm going to make it as like far as I absolutely possibly can. How did you deal with, like, did you feel imposter syndrome? Like, how did you work through like that identity and that shift?
I love talking about imposter syndrome. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is I can remember one of my mentors at the agency who's like a world-renowned expert in her craft, one of the smartest people I've ever known, and probably one of the most powerful people at the organization, told me when she found out I was leaving, I wish I had a skill set so I could leave and do something different. As if I like, first of all, as if she, this like absolutely brilliant genius, like doesn't have a million useful skill sets, but that's another topic of conversation. But as if I like came out of the womb knowing how to shoot my camera in manual. I'm like, no, you guys, like you got it wrong, okay? I YouTubed like how to start a business, how to shoot a camera in manual. Like that's how it starts. And I think a lot of times, like when I grew up hearing about entrepreneurship, I just assumed that anyone who was an entrepreneur grew up around it and had parents who were business owners. And so they were like starting, lawn mowing services when they were in middle school and stuff. And like, I was never around that. And I think it's so much simpler than people think, in the same way that like applying to the agency is simpler than people think. You just like get on a computer and type in CIA.gov. It's the same thing. You get on your computer, you do a little research, and then you like buy a camera and you almost throw up in your car because it was really expensive. And like, you better do something with this now because that was $1,000. And it's nitty gritty. And I think in some ways it's a lot simpler than people think it is. And in many ways, it's much scarier and it's much riskier. And I don't want to act as if those emotions aren't valid. But I just think people have so much more power than they think, especially today. Like the wealth and just the simple abundance of like how much education there is out there in virtually everything and for free. You can teach yourself to do anything. And so that's what I did. I will say that like, in the spirit of being candid, I had no capital to do this. So I also like took out a credit card and put $20,000 of camera gear on a credit card, which I don't recommend doing because it was very hard to pay off. But that's what I did. So when people tell me like I could never, I'm like, well, listen, you can, and it's not as crazy as you think it is. You have a computer.
I have so many questions. This is the part of the interview that I was really interested in. And so that's the only reason why I'm here. So, all right. How did you even get into the whole photography thing? Did it start while you were still at the agency and then like COVID hit and you were like, I don't want to make bread. Let's do some photography?
I've yet to make a loaf of sourdough, and I feel like it's really like a missing criteria.
Did you even live through COVID
but
if you haven't made a piece of bread?
I want to. When I had done my very quick stint at the UN, I was 21 years old. I had literally no idea what was going on in the world. And it was the best job in the world because I showed up and my manager was this like 7-foot tall Dutch guy. And he said, here's a camera, here's a notepad, here's your Palestinian translator. The West Bank is that way. Go interview refugees. Like that was my job. And so I just spent like the next few months traipsing around these refugee camps in the West Bank, like having no business being there, you guys. I can't even describe. And learning how to interview people, learning how to conduct like field research, I guess, and taking photos. And the goal of this project was to put together these profiles on each of the refugee camps in the West Bank to hand out to donors, basically. So we knew where to send funds. Did this camp need more help with sanitation? Did they need more hospitals? Whatever. And part of that job was taking photographs. And so a lot of those photographs ended up getting published like on the UN website. I think they might still be up there. I'm not sure. But in terms of my first like little kid job, it was, I really feel like I got so lucky. I just had so much freedom. And that was the first time anyone had like put a camera in my hands and asked me to tell a story with it. So I had no training. I wouldn't consider that really like professional photography, but I'm like, it's photojournalism. That's where it got started. It was just in a refugee camp, not at a wedding. So we've obviously made a big leap there. But so that's where it started. And then honestly, my husband and I got married right before COVID. We got married January of 2020. And so a month before the world shut down. And we, to be honest with you, I really didn't care. Like I didn't give a shit about weddings. We probably would have eloped if not for some of our family and friends like wanting to celebrate. So we had a wedding and our photographers showed up and our videographers showed up, and there were these 23-year-old women, so younger than me at the time, who were running these incredible businesses, flying all over the world. And they were so professional. I was just so blown away by them and the experience they offered us. That was the first time I considered like, wow, okay, this could really be a career. And a career for me meant, I also wanted to really like make money. This wasn't just like an altruistic artist thing. I'm someone who's very interested in making money. And I had grown up believing very strongly in the kind of starving artist archetype. So I think when it was demonstrated to me that no, actually you can live this colorful, adventurous life and be outdoors as opposed to in a basement with no windows, and you can be around people all the time, and actually you can get paid very well to do it. It was just this like really expansive experience for me. And I remember the day after our wedding, I texted my best friend and I said, I'm gonna become a wedding photographer. And she texted me back and said, I'm gonna become a florist. And now we both have done that and we work weddings together. And so it's this really fun, it's this really fun full circle thing. But from there, I basically kind of the decision was made. I can remember going on a hike and telling my husband, like I ultimately wanted to be able to support us. I mean, of course he has his work and does his thing, but I wanted to contribute by being a photographer and filmmaker. And he said, you're nuts, but go ahead. And I bought a camera and I just immediately started like whoring myself out to all my friends, anyone I knew who was engaged, getting married, had already been married. Can I do a photo shoot with you? And I just shot for free for like 18 months. And I set up shoots all over the country. And it was COVID, but because we had so much time off and photography was outside, in most cases, I could still like shoot with people and I would be 3 feet away, 6 feet away. And so I just used that time to build my portfolio so that when COVID kind of ran out, I was ready to fully go. Like it looked like I had a full portfolio and I started working. And then, that's the kind of amazing thing about business. It's like a slow crawl and then all of a sudden people know about you and you start shooting. And yeah, so that was 2021 when I officially started it. And I've been full-time now for like 14, 15 months. And it's amazing. I feel like I've won the jackpot every day.
That is amazing to hear. I love these types of stories where people not only leave government and then go into the private sector because I think it's really important. But then people that don't do anything with national security when they were in national security. It's like Cameron and I interviewed one of our mutual friends, James, and he went to like a boot camp for data science and is now just doing like data science and nothing to do with government, nothing to do with like all this kind of stuff. But he talks about like the creativity that you get, not just from leaving, but then like this almost like a rebirth when you leave national security and you don't have to worry about any of this like garbage. Like I never have to say the words Al Qaeda again in my life. And it's amazing. And so
yeah, it really is. It was a very invigorating experience. Although I wasn't sure at the time that it was going to feel that way.
Yeah.
And there were certainly. I mean, I was extremely fortunate that the people in my immediate proximity were overwhelmingly supportive. And I think we're used to me kind of saying out of pocket things and like doing weird things and kind of making them work. So people were very supportive. But of course. I got many comments like, what are you possibly thinking? And to get into kind of the ego discussion, like that was a real journey going from this very prestigious career to what I'm doing now, which I think is also very prestigious, but which no one else does. No one else thinks that really, and that uncoupling was excruciating at times. And was a real process. I think one that I'm probably still trying to reconcile.
I'm glad you mentioned that because like Cameron, I don't know about like how many friends you still have in, but most of my friend group, I started in the IC in 2010. In the majority of my friend group, including my spouse, are still within this world, and they are now at the point where they're hitting the GS 14, 15 SES level, and they're having like these badass titles and like they're doing like these really cool PDB rotations and going to the sit room and like doing all this stuff at OSD, and it's just like, wow, you guys have really made it. These it sounds prestigious. And they're like, oh yeah, well, what's your job now? And I'm like, I'm in business development, or like I'm in like product marketing. And it's like it's just it doesn't have the same ring to it, you know what I mean? So I totally get this whole like it's not imposter syndrome, but it's just like no one else thinks this is as cool as I do.
Yeah, and they don't need to think it's as cool as you do or need to know how cool it is. But I do think it's a very human emotion to want people to think it's as cool as you do, and to feel the gap between where you were and where you are now. Even if that gap leveled you up in fulfillment, in happiness, in money, in whatever it may be, it looks like a chasm to everyone else. And I'm acutely aware of that.
No, it's bringing me back as we're talking through this to, I remember as I was getting ready to leave, a lot of times the discussion would be like, that I would have internally is I told myself, oh, well, I'll be right back in the building just in a different capacity with Deloitte. And so I really wasn't actually leaving the mission. And I think looking back on it with a little bit of distance, that was like, I was grappling with that loss of like mission and purpose. And the identity, I think, comes hand in hand with that. That said, I think, Kelly, to your point, like my life has dramatically improved, at least from my perspective, from like a happiness perspective, relationship perspective. And I think like there is like, and for me, I think there's this real cost that comes with the mission, and the mission is so satisfying at times, but that cost, as for me, as I started to like, have a family, it got to be really rough. There was one point I came back from a TDY and my son like was like shocked that I was a real person and not like a face on a screen. Right. So like those things like matter to me personally, and everyone's going to have their own values that drive them. But I think like there's part of this like work, and I'd be interested if like on how you've done this of like, how do you, cause I still to this day, I still have these pangs of like, man, if I had still been there, think of all the good I could have done. That's outweighed by the good I'm doing in my family and the good I'm doing in my work, but they still come. So how do you like deal with that? And I don't know if you have any strategies or like techniques that I could steal from you.
Well, I think probably first and foremost, I feel really grateful that the whole time I was at the agency, I was also keenly aware that I had a lot of other interests because I do feel like they kind of hold it over your head of like, it'll never get as good as this. You're kind of at the peak. You're the best and the brightest. And I was always kind of like, I don't know. I like whales and stuff. Like I could be like an oceanographer. Like that sounds pretty fun. Or like I could go work at a fashion magazine. Like seriously though, like I mean, there's so many things I'm interested in. So I just never felt like terribly pigeonholed as much as they, I think, wanted me to feel that way in many cases. But I did derive a tremendous amount of not just satisfaction, but pride in being there. I mean, you know, for all the like shit I talk about the experience, I'm so proud of so many things that we did, so many things I was a part of, things that my friends are doing now. And I worked really, really hard to get there. And it was very hard to get there, as you guys well know. And so it was a big part of my identity. And I don't know how it was for you, but obviously, you know, nobody knows, but like so many people know what you do. And if they don't know, it's like just as interesting to them because you're like, that's cool weirdo girl who was always like, I don't know, overseas doing some weird stuff she can't talk about.
Mysterious things. Yeah,
looking
and so
at whales.
Just that, exactly, you know, I mean, so I liked that about myself. And I knew it gave me an edge with people. And I really enjoyed that. I felt like it immediately made me cool. And I mean, I'm sure that sounds off-putting, but it's just how I felt.
It's real though.
Yeah, I mean, and I also think that, I don't know if it's the media, I don't know if it's the organization, but they do a really good job of trying to make us feel like assholes when we do talk about it. And I try to remind myself now, like, there's nothing wrong with having conversations about this. Like, you're not harming anyone, you're not doing anything wrong. And it is part of our story that we get to claim. I mean, I don't know how long it was for you guys, but it was 5 years of my life. I'm 31 years old. That's a big chunk of my life. And I deserve to claim that and to be proud of what I did there. And I am. The first week after I resigned, my husband and I went to a networking event. I'd never been to a networking event in DC in my life. And it was for some like wildlife refuge. And my husband was going around and he's like so great in these situations and everyone's asking him. And usually when people would ask me, I don't even remember what I used to say at these things, but I was very rarely in instances where I had to answer these questions. And for the first time it was posed to me and I realized my answer was no longer, I'm a CIA officer. My answer was, I'm a wedding photographer. And it just sounded like so horrible coming out of my mouth and like so boring and so like simpleton. And I remember we got in the car and I cried on the way home. And I remember telling my husband, like, and I know I really know how pathetic this sounds, but I remember telling him, like, am I ever going to be cool again?
Oh, no.
And I think, yeah, I really had to undergo a lot of self-reflection about like why so much of my ego was wrapped up in that job title and what were the parts of me that worked there that were still present. Like I'm still, you know, I'm using my foreign languages more now than I ever did there. I'm traveling more now than I ever did then. And there's all these things that like bring me personal joy that I'm experiencing now, as opposed to just things that made me sound like a badass to other people, even though I wasn't really doing shit. Like I was sitting at a desk a lot of the time.
Reading the news.
That juxtaposition. Yeah, like I shouldn't say that. I don't even like the news. Like, I don't even, I just spent a long time I think I was bored. And so I think I compensated for that by feeling really good about what other people thought I was doing. And I'm not sure I was totally cognizant of it at the time, but now the life that I'm living might not sound quite as prestigious on the outside and it might not make sense to a lot of people, but I'm having the time of my life and I feel like I've like won the life jackpot lottery all the time. Like it feels fake that I get to do this for my job. And so I think just being really honest with myself about how I felt back then versus how I feel now is really helpful for me. And I'm able to do that. And honestly, I was able to do that quite quickly because at the end there I was sad. And unhappy for a long time at the end there, and being really honest with myself about that is helpful.
If I may, you keep saying it's not prestigious, but you've landed on like your photos have been on the cover of Vogue. Like that is an important, like this is an important thing for a lot of people. So can you walk through like how you got from like starting your own business to landing, your first, what's this? I don't even know the term, but like.
Also, can we say the name?
Okay,
It's been like 30 minutes of this thing and we haven't even like said your company's name.
Oh, my company name is Kelly Moore, Mour. It's just Kelly Moore Productions. But yeah, it's a photography and filmmaking business. I'm such a good businesswoman. I shoot luxury destination weddings all over the world, and it's the time of my life. And while I would very much love to see my work on the cover of Vogue, it was not on the cover, but yes, it has been in British Vogue and a lot of other publications, which was a really wonderful nudge in the right direction, because when you make a decision like this and everyone tells you you're nuts, it's nice when little things come along like that and you're like, oh, I will be able to derive like joy and fulfillment from other things. But you had asked about mission, and I think it is really important to talk about that coming from a place where mission is everything. It's at the core of everything that we do, and I think it's the reason we're willing to make so many sacrifices. What I have found is that broadening my definition of mission has been really life-giving. And I have found mission in places where I was not seeking it. I have found mission when a bride emails me a year after her wedding and tells me that her father passed away and that the last photos she has of them together are the ones I took at their wedding. I find mission when I film wedding videos and grandparents who were too sick to travel to the wedding get to watch that video and I get to see their reactions. I think I found at the end, for me, it was never really about the mission. It was about storytelling. And I still get to tell stories every day, and I get to have a lot more control over what those stories say. That has been extremely fulfilling to me.
You started with weddings. How did you get into the luxury destination wedding niche?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think the honest answer is some of it is time. You work hard enough for long enough. I think you get there. I think a big part of it, though, and when I'm asked this question, like on wedding podcasts, because of course everyone's trying to move up in the market and shoot bigger and more expensive weddings, I really draw upon my corporate experience. I mean, having nearly 10 years of work experience before starting my own business was, just hugely formative in the way that I do everything. And I think going through the things that I had gone through at the agency and the trainings that I'd gone through, you'd be surprised how much of that like tenacity and resilience and energy shows up in owning a small business and in just being brave and being willing to take risks. And so I think that a lot of the same characteristics that make a really good CIA officer also make a really good small business owner and a really good product manager and a really good, I could go on and on and on, but I always see this through line in my resume, which makes literally no sense now if you look at it. But for me, there's this through line in that there's a pursuit of excellence in everything I've done. And I think in everything that we do, those of us who've had these experiences, and a real dedication to one's craft and a desire to become an expert. Those personality traits didn't change when I left the agency. If anything, they were fostered there and made stronger. And I think coming out with those skill sets put me in a position of having, quite frankly, a lot more confidence than I deserved to have when starting a business. And I know how nuts this sounds, but wedding days, large scale events are crazy. Everything goes wrong. Wedding planners are yelling. The couple is upset. When things are going crazy, I think back to some of these trainings I did or some of the situations that I was in foreign countries. And I'm like, man, I did all that. This is nothing. It is such an important day in people's lives, but no one's dying today. It's going to be okay. And that really gives me such confidence, and I'm so grateful for that. So I really do feel like there are a lot of things that applied to all these jobs I've done before that still apply to the one that I'm doing today. And I think that I wish more people knew that, because the number of times I heard really qualified, wonderful people at the agency say, I just don't have transferable skill sets. I'm like, what do you mean? I still can't wrap my head around that, and how many times I heard it, and the people I heard it from, and we're talking about some of the like most brilliant minds of our generation saying they don't have transferable skill sets. Like, I just, you're a human being dedicated to excellence. You've made it this far in this place that makes it very difficult to get anywhere. That is your transferable skill set, right? And I wish I could blast that message to everyone, and perhaps that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
that's our.
the goal.
I think that's part of our hope. Yeah. And so as you're growing, like as your business grows and develops, where does it end for you? Like, does this end with like, yeah, what's kind of the future of Kelly Moore, and like what are your plans? What should we be looking forward to?
Oh man, it still feels so early in this specific journey for me, but I do hope that this is a business I'll be running for decades. I hope to someday soon be shooting the biggest events in the world. I think I will be. Give me a couple more years. And then I know I want to also pull in some other things. So I really wanted to get my business to a point where I felt like it was running smoothly enough on its own before I started doing anything else. But I'm interested in doing some freelance writing here and there, and pulling in some things that are a little bit more cerebral, perhaps. And today I opened an application for a freelance writer for a magazine that I really love. So it's exciting to look into those opportunities now. I will say it was quite humbling to pull up like a CV template because I don't have one. I literally never thought that I would write a resume again in my life. And it's like all these really, really serious things, and then like photographer. So that's, it's just like, it's so goofy, but it's so fun. It just feels like, I hate to use this phrase, but it really feels like the world is my oyster. And like, I'm so grateful for all of these skills that I acquired during the 5 years that I was in DC, because I feel really primed to just do like whatever the fuck I want. And whether I deserve to have that confidence or not, I don't know, but it feels good to have it. And I wish more people could imbue their life with that, because I think there are a lot of really smart people who could be really happy doing other things if they gave themselves the opportunity to do so.
And valuable things. I am convinced now more than ever, right, that there is no like such thing as like a meaningless job or a meaningless task, even though it sometimes feels like that. I mean, we've covered a lot of things today. I wanted to give you this chance, Kelly. Like, is there anything that we haven't hit on that you'd want to like share with the audience, or anything that you think would be like valuable as like a parting message?
I guess what I would say is that I get asked all the time if I miss it. And my very honest answer is that I haven't missed it for 1 second. And that's not because I didn't have positive experiences. That's not because there's not things I love. I just think the world is a lot bigger than we were perhaps made to believe it is. And there's so many opportunities for you to have a place in it. It doesn't need to be the place that you're in now, no matter how long it took you to get there, no matter how hard you worked to get there. And it's not worth waiting around just to get your pension. You can delete that.
I'm keeping it in. People need to hear that part.
Yeah. No, they need to hear it. I think that's like, yeah, they need to hear it. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This has been like, I think my favorite episode to date. Like, just given
you just want a free photo.
How unique your story is.
Free headshots.
Listen,
no,
you
there's
need
no
a photo shoot. It's complimentary.
There's no ulterior motives here. But no, seriously, this has been
He's
so
like, by the way, my little brother's getting married next month.
We need a little calendar.
As members of the Mormon faith, my little brother got married when he was like 19.
Yeah, he's long gone. Yeah.
So he's got 3-4 kids at this point. So it'll be his grandkids by the time, or his kid, my nieces and nephews who need it next. But thank you so much, Kelly, again for everything, and to our audience listening in. Like, I seriously would like, take heart. Like, there's so many spaces and opportunities for you to dig in, and who knows where you'll go. Follow us. Let us know what you think. We're going to post Kelly's and Kelly Moore's information in the links in the podcast description. So hit her up. Like, this is, I think, another testament to like just how incredible the people in this industry are, and that continues beyond their IC careers. So Kelly, thanks again.
Thank you guys so much. This was really a blast.